Have you ever stopped to think about just how far back our human story goes, say, in a place like India? Or, how a single, maybe overlooked bone fragment can suddenly ignite this huge global scientific debate?
It's incredible, isn't it, how these little clues unlock massive questions.
Exactly. So today we're diving deep into some of those really big questions. We're talking about our ancient past, the very origins of our species, Homo sapiens, and even how deeply things like menstruation and menopause are tangled up with culture and evolution.
A real journey through time and biology.
That's the plan. Our mission today is to take this stack of fascinating sources, we've got archaeology, anthropology, biology, and pull out the absolute key nuggets of knowledge for you.
Kind of a shortcut to getting really well informed on some complex topics.
Precisely. We'll cover India's Middle Paleolithic culture, try to unravel the whole mystery of the Rhodesian Man fossil.
Always a controversial one.
Right. Then explore the big theories on where Homo sapiens actually came from, look at the amazing culture of the Upper Paleolithic, and finally connect all that back to menarche and menopause.
It all ties together in fascinating ways. Get ready for some aha moments, hopefully.
Okay, first up, the Middle Paleolithic in India. Our sources suggest this period, sometimes seen as just a transition, wasn't always the star of the show in research terms.
That's right. And what's really interesting is while it definitely connects to bigger global patterns, like tool technologies elsewhere, the focused study of it in India actually kicked off relatively recently. It needed someone to establish its proper place.
And that someone was H.D. Sankalia from Deccan College, Pune, wasn't it? What did he find that was so significant? Why was his work considered groundbreaking?
Well, his excavation in 1956 near the Pravara River in Maharashtra, that was pivotal. He unearthed tool sets that were clearly more evolved, very close to the Mousterian style that's the tool making associated with Neanderthals globally.
Okay, so that established a link. But was he the very first to spot these kinds of tools?
Not quite the very first, no. Robert Bruce Foote had actually found some Middle Paleolithic tools earlier in the Attarampakkam region, the Madrasian zone, and others had found evolved tools up in the Sohan Valley region, too.
Oh, yeah.
But Sankalia's work, his careful excavation, that really provided what archaeologists call a well-established layer. It had distinct tool technology, and it properly put India's Middle Paleolithic on the map in '56. It showed this was a substantial period, not just scattered finds.
Got it. So once it was established, what did we learn about where these Middle Paleolithic folks lived? Was it just a few spots, or were they, all over?
Oh, they were incredibly widespread, almost everywhere across India, really. We're talking Rajasthan, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, down through Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra, Odisha, Bengal, even Uttar Pradesh.
Wow, so pretty much coast to coast, north to south.
Exactly. Think of famous sites like Navasa in Maharashtra, Ridwana in Rajasthan, the rock shelters at Bhimbetka in MP, Sangankalu in Karnataka. They all show evidence.
And did they live in the same kinds of places everywhere?
No, and that's interesting. It raises questions about adaptation, right? In the south, the peninsula region, they often use caves, rock shelters, or live near the upper and middle parts of rivers like the Krishna and Godavari.
Okay.
But up north, in the extra-peninsular areas, you find their sites more in the lower river reaches, valleys, plains. It seems they adapted their settlement based largely on the local topography, the lay of the land.
Makes sense. And the climate must have been varied, too.
Hugely varied. Northern India was experiencing glacial conditions, much colder. But the peninsula down south was fluvial, lots of rain, active rivers.
Life found a way.
Absolutely. Despite the differences, flora and fauna were abundant pretty much everywhere. Central India was fascinatingly an ecotone, a transition zone. You find a mix of animals there, bones of wild ox in Maharashtra, wild elephants near Chandoli. A rushed environment.
It sounds like this period lasted quite a while. What's the general time frame we're looking at for this culture in India? And does it tell us anything about how people might have moved around?
Yeah, chronology can be tricky, but on average, we're talking roughly 125,000 years ago down to about 30,000 years ago. That's the broad window Gila Mishra suggests. Specific sites vary, of course. Navasian culture around 39,000, Sohan maybe 50,000, Andhra sites around 40,000 years old.
Okay, quite a range.
And intriguingly, the northern sites, like Dedwana in Rajasthan, which dates back to maybe 100,000 years ago, tend to be older than the southern sites.
Ah, so what does that suggest?
Well, it hints at a possible north-to-south migration pattern for these cultures across India over that immense time span, people moving, adapting, spreading out.
Fascinating. Okay, let's talk tools. What were they using? Was it a total break from earlier periods? And what materials did they favor?
Their main toolkit was Mousterian, made using that Levallois technique we mentioned, very similar to Neanderthal tools globally. It's a more efficient way to prepare a stone core to get predictable sharp flakes. Quite a cognitive leap.
But not only Mousterian.
Right. In India, we see this interesting carry forward of older technologies too. Acheulean hand axes, Oldowan choppers. It's a unique mix. Southern sites often show more of the evolved Mousterian Levallois stuff, while northern sites sometimes have a greater presence of the older tool types.
The materials.
Beyond the usual quartzite, they started using these beautiful crystalline silica pebbles, things like agate, jasper, chalcedony.
Oh, those are quite striking stones.
Exactly. They have this smooth texture, lovely colors, and, might have even been seen as somewhat precious or special back then. Imagine crafting your tools not just from functional rock, but from these stones that feel almost sacred. What does that tell us about their skill, their developing sense of aesthetics, maybe even an early appreciation for beauty?
It adds a whole different layer, doesn't it? Okay, let's shift continents now. Next up, the Rhodesian Man. What exactly is this fossil, and why does it cause such a stir in the scientific world?
Rhodesian Man. Well, it's more than just a skull. It really highlights how tricky interpreting the past can be, especially when early finds weren't perfectly documented. It refers to what we call a transitional form of humans, sometimes labeled archaic sapiens. Meaning it shows features that seem to sit somewhere between the earlier Homo erectus and us, Homo sapiens. And the debate really boils down to how you classify these in-betweeners. You have the lumpers, who basically say, look, these are just variations of Homo erectus.
Okay.
And then you have the splitters, who argue, no, these are different enough to be their own species, often classifying them as Homo heidelbergensis.
So for the splitters, where does Rhodesian Man fit into the bigger picture of human evolution?
In their view, an earlier African Homo erectus, sometimes called Homo ergaster, evolved into this transitional form, Homo heidelbergensis, right there in Africa. Then this group started migrating.
Out of Africa.
Yes, some went to Europe and eventually evolved into Neanderthals. The group that stayed behind in Africa continued evolving, ultimately leading to Homo sapiens. So Rhodesian Man, or Homo heidelbergensis, becomes this absolutely crucial link, a potential common ancestor for both us and Neanderthals.
Wow. Okay, so where was this specific puzzling fossil first found, and what was the issue with the discovery?
The original skull was found around 1921 in Kabwe Hills, also known as Broken Hill, in what's now Zambia. A mining worker found it quite deep, about 18 meters down.
Okay.
But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The exact context wasn't properly recorded. Things like the precise depth, what other fossils or tools were nearby, the type of sediment, that information was lost or never noted down properly.
Oh, dear.
Yeah. And that lack of clear context really hampered scientists for ages. It made it incredibly difficult to definitively date it and understand its true significance in the human family tree, a real puzzle piece with fuzzy edges.
So what did the skull itself look like? Did it seem more erectus or more sapiens?
It was this fascinating mosaic, really. It had clear erectus-like features, a thick cranial bone, really prominent brow ridges, and something called an occipital torus, that's a kind of bony ridge at the back of the skull.
Right.
But then it also showed sapiens-like traits. The skull vault was more globular, sort of rounder like ours, and the inside of the skull was smoother. Size-wise, it was closer to erectus, but it was taller, and the teeth were a bit smaller, which leans more towards sapiens. Truly a blend.
Were these transitional forms only found in Africa, or do they pop up elsewhere?
Oh, not at all unique to Africa. Fossils that get classified as Homo heidelbergensis or similar archaic humans have turned up across the Old World. In Africa, besides Kabwe, you have the Bodo cranium in Ethiopia, maybe 600,000 years old.
Right.
In Europe, there's Swanscombe in England, the famous Mauer jaw from Heidelberg in Germany, both very old, maybe 600,000 years. And importantly, Atapuerca in Spain, the pit of bones, with remains of maybe 28 individuals, possibly ancestors to Neanderthals.
In Asia.
Yes, in China too. Complete skulls from places like Dali, and partial skeletons from Jinshan. This widespread distribution really complicates that simple, linear picture of evolution, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And you mentioned China. Our sources bring up an interesting point about nationalism potentially influencing how these fossils are interpreted there. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's a sensitive area where science and national identity can sometimes intersect. The sources suggest that there's an emphasis in China on these transitional fossils because they support a regional continuity model for human origins.
Instead of out of Africa.
Exactly. The idea pushed is that Homo erectus populations in China, like the famous Peking man, evolved directly into modern Homo sapiens within China itself. They point to features in ancient fossils, like flat faces or epicanthic folds, the eyelid feature, and claim these show continuity with modern East Asian populations. So it becomes more than just a scientific debate about fossils. It touches on national pride and projecting a very long, independent history onto the global stage. Here just reporting what the sources say on this, of course, not taking a side.
Understood. So, setting aside the classification debates, what do we know about how these transitional humans actually lived, their culture?
Well, their culture also shows that blend of old-new. In Africa, the tools associated with them are often Acheulean, like those older hand axes. But in Europe, you find a mix, including Mousterian tools made with that Levallois technique.
So, adaptable toolkits.
Yes, and the evidence points to them being active, capable hunter-gatherers. Crucially, there's solid proof they could control fire, finding charcoal and burnt bone in their living sites is key. They also ate marine foods, suggesting they exploited diverse resources.
So, what's the takeaway on Rhodesian man and his contemporaries?
They represent a really critical evolutionary stage, bridging that gap between earlier Homo erectus and the later, more modern humans, like Neanderthals and us. Their existence highlights the complexity, the branching nature of evolution, and the ongoing debates about where you draw the line between species gradual change versus distinct jumps.
Right, that gradualism versus punctuated equilibrium idea. Okay, let's pivot now to the origin story that directly involves us, Homo sapiens. Our sources lay out two main competing narratives. What were the big ideas trying to explain where modern humans came from?
Okay, so the first major contender is the regional continuity model. You might also hear it called the multi-regional hypothesis. Milford Wolpoff was a key proponent. The core idea here is that Homo erectus migrated out of Africa just once, but really early on.
Okay, one early migration, then what?
Then, according to this model, these erectus populations in different parts of the world, Europe, Asia, Africa, all evolved independently in parallel towards becoming Homo sapiens.
But wait, if they evolved separately for so long, wouldn't they have become different species? How come we're all one species, Homo sapiens, today, and can interbreed?
That's the million-dollar question, and the model has an answer. It proposes constant gene flow between these regional populations. Essentially, enough regular interaction, migration, and interbreeding happened across the globe to keep everyone part of the same interconnected gene pool, preventing them from splitting into distinct species.
Interesting. What evidence did they point to for this regional continuity?
They highlighted the persistence of certain physical traits in specific regions. For example, we mentioned those features in Chinese fossils, flat faces, maybe epicanthic folds seen as linking ancient populations to modern ones there.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in Europe, certain Neanderthal jaw features were noted as being present in some modern Europeans. The argument was these traits were inherited directly from local ancestors, showing continuous evolution in place. What strikes you about that idea? It paints a picture of deep, long-standing roots in different parts of the world.
It does. Okay, so what's the other main theory? The out-of-Africa theory. This one also seems to have a couple of important variations.
That's right. The core out-of-Africa idea is fundamentally different. It proposes that Homo sapiens originated only in Africa, relatively recently, maybe around 200,000 years ago.
Okay, exclusively African origin.
And then much later, maybe around 100,000 years ago, a second major migration wave occurred, this time of fully modern Homo sapiens leaving Africa and spreading across the globe.
Right, so if sapiens spread out later, what happened to those earlier human groups already living outside Africa, like the Neanderthals in Europe or the descendants of Erectus in Asia? This is where the two versions come in, right? Let's start with complete replacement.
Exactly. The complete replacement model, strongly associated with Christoph Stringer, argues that as Homo sapiens expanded, they simply, well, replaced the existing archaic population.
Replaced how? Like conflict?
Not necessarily direct warfare, though that might have happened sometimes. The theory often emphasizes economic competition. Perhaps sapiens with maybe slightly more advanced cognition, better tools, or more complex social organization just outcompeted Neanderthals and others for resources over thousands of years, maybe 30,000 to 50,000 years of overlap. Gradually, the older populations dwindled and disappeared.
What's the evidence supporting this out-of-Africa complete replacement scenario?
The genetic evidence initially seemed very strong. First, modern African populations show the highest genetic diversity anywhere in the world. That's exactly what you'd expect if Africa was the source population, like the center of a splash radiating outwards.
Okay, the diversity points to Africa.
Second, studies of mitochondrial DNA passed down the maternal line, and later Y chromosome DNA passed down the paternal line, both pointed towards a common sapiens ancestor originating in Africa somewhere in that 200,000 to 100,000 year window.
And the Neanderthal connection.
Crucially, when scientists first managed to sequence Neanderthal mitochondrial DNA and compared it to modern humans, they found no significant similarity. This was taken as strong evidence against interbreeding and supported the idea that we simply replace them without mixing.
But then science marched on, didn't it? There's a newer version of Out of Africa that tells a different story.
Absolutely. This is where things get really exciting. It's the partial replacement, or interbreeding theory. People like Fred Smith were proponents, but the real breakthrough came from Svante Pääbo, who won a Nobel Prize for this work.
So what does this theory propose?
It elegantly combines elements of both previous ideas. Yes, Sapiens originated in Africa. Yes, they migrated out. But instead of completely replacing the archaic groups they met, they interbred with them, at least to some extent.
They interbred, so modern humans are hybrids.
In a sense, yes, we carry a genetic echo of those ancient encounters.
What was the game-changing evidence for this? You mentioned Pääbo.
The absolute game changer was when Pääbo and his team managed to sequence the entire Neanderthal nuclear genome, not just the mitochondrial DNA. And the nuclear DNA told a totally different story.
What did it show?
It revealed that modern humans of European and Asian descent share between 1% and 4% of their DNA directly with Neanderthals. These aren't just general human genes, they are specific genetic variants unique to the Neanderthal lineage.
Wow. So actual Neanderthal genes in us? Like what?
All sorts of things. For instance, there's a gene cluster on chromosome 3 inherited from Neanderthals that's linked to a higher risk of severe COVID-19. On the other hand, maybe some immune system genes. There's even research suggesting a gene variant related to being an early bird, waking up early, might have Neanderthal origins.
That's incredible. So what does this discovery do to that continuity of features argument from the regional continuity model? Things like the occipital bun or specific jaw shapes.
Exactly. It reframes them completely. Those features, once seen as proof of direct, unbroken local evolution, are now often reinterpreted as potential evidence of that interbreeding. We might have inherited some of those physical traits along with the genes.
Right.
Fred Smith suggested that while interbreeding occurred, maybe those more obvious Neanderthal physical traits, like their stocky build adapted for cold, gradually became less common in sapiens populations as the climate changed after the Ice Age, and as we developed better cultural buffers like tailored clothing and more reliable fire. Our biology adapted, but the genes remained as a hidden legacy.
It really shows how science builds on itself. New data completely changing the picture. Which theory feels most convincing now with this latest evidence?
Well, the evidence for interbreeding from the nuclear DNA is extremely compelling. So the partial replacement, or out of Africa with hybridization model, is currently the most widely accepted scientific consensus. It acknowledges our primary African origin, but incorporates those fascinating genetic contributions from archaic humans we met along the way. It makes our history much richer and, frankly, more interesting.
It really does. Okay, so Homo sapiens have emerged, likely interbred a bit, and started spreading. What was life like for them during this next phase, the Upper Paleolithic? Sources mention big environmental shifts setting the stage.
Yeah, the Upper Paleolithic saw some major global warming trends. Ice sheets melting, sea levels rising. This led to huge changes in landscapes, with forests and grasslands expanding dramatically.
And that meant?
An explosion in animal populations, especially large herbivores like deer, horses, bison. Europe, in particular, is sometimes described as becoming a hunter's paradise during this time.
More food, maybe.
More people. This abundance likely fueled a significant population overshoot, a real boom in human numbers.
With more people and presumably more complex lives, how did their tool-making change? Did it keep pace?
Oh, it didn't just keep pace, it accelerated dramatically. This era is marked by incredible technological innovation and regional diversification. In France alone, over about 27,000 years, archaeologists identify at least 5 distinct successive tool cultures in clear geological layers.
5 cultures? Like what?
It starts with the Chattel-Perronian, which seems derived from the earlier Mousterian, featuring distinctive tools like backed blades, sharp on one edge, intentionally blunted on the other, maybe for hafting or safer handling.
Okay, and evolution. What's that?
Then comes the aurignation, and here's where things get really interesting culturally. We see the widespread use of bone and antler for tools, things like awls, potentially for working leather. We find personal ornaments, beads made from shells, animal teeth, carved figurines made of ivory depicting humans and animals.
Wow, art is appearing.
And get this, musical instruments. A bone flute found in Vogelherd Cave in Germany dates back maybe 30,000 years. Can you imagine music being made tens of thousands of years ago?
Incredible. What followed the aurignation?
The Gravegian period. Here, we see innovations in hunting technology, specialized spear points, possibly darts, maybe even animal and fish traps, suggesting broader subsistence strategies. This is also the period famous for those Venus figurines.
Yes, the small female statues.
Found across a vast area from France to Siberia, typically small, carved figures of women, often with exaggerated breasts, hips, and bellies, but lacking facial details, believed to be symbols of fertility, life, perhaps totems or carried charms.
Showing complex symbolic thought. What came after Gravedia?
Then we have the Solutrean, primarily in France and Spain, and here the tools reach a new level of, well, aesthetic refinement. They developed a technique called indirect percussion, using a punch between the hammerstone and the core, allowing for incredibly fine, precise flaking.
So fine, they weren't for everyday use.
Some of them, particularly the beautiful laurel leaf-shaped points, seem too delicate, too finely made for rough use. The thinking is they might have been prestige items, maybe used for social display, exchange, or even ritual purposes. Showing off skill, perhaps.
Fascinating. And the last one.
The Magdalenian. This represents the culmination of Upper Paleolithic tool technology, both in terms of effectiveness and artistry. This is where we definitively see the bow and arrow appearing.
A major hunting innovation.
Huge. And another incredibly clever device called the atlatl, or spear thrower. It's essentially a hooked stick that acts as a lever, adding tremendous velocity and distance to a thrown spear. A real force multiplier.
Clever engineering.
Absolutely. And alongside these practical tools, we see incredibly intricate engravings on bone, antler, and even stone tools themselves. Tiny detailed carvings of animals. It suggests not just art, but maybe marking ownership, group identity, almost like a prehistoric signature or trademark.
So all this advanced tech must have changed their daily lives, their diet.
Definitely. They became hyper-efficient hunter-gatherers. Meat likely formed a very significant part of their diet, judging by animal bone finds. Marine resources, fish, shellfish, marine mammals also became increasingly important in coastal areas. And towards the very end of the period, as climates continue to warm, we start seeing the first hints of reliance on wild grains and cereals.
Which brings us to that provocative idea from Yuval Noah Harari. It is not the man who domesticated the plant, but the other way round. How does that fit in here?
It's a fascinating perspective shift, isn't it? The idea is that early humans didn't necessarily set out to farm. Maybe they just noticed that certain wild grasses, the ancestors of wheat and barley, grew abundantly in some areas, providing a reliable food source.
So they stuck around those areas.
Exactly. They started staying near these patches of abundant wild grains. Then perhaps they started helping them along clearing competitors, maybe accidentally scattering seeds. Over time, this led to deliberate cultivation and a more sedentary lifestyle, staying put to tend their crops.
And the plants domesticated us part.
Harari suggests that this shift changed us. We became tied to the land, reliant on the rhythms of agriculture. He even speculates about biological changes, like maybe a reduction in aggression, similar to how domesticated animals become more docile compared to their wild ancestors. We essentially adapted our lives, our societies, even potentially our biology, to suit the needs of these plants. It really flips the script on who's in charge. Makes you think, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Beyond food and tools, these Homo sapiens were clearly developing complex inner lives. What do their burials and art tell us about their beliefs, their intellect?
Oh, profoundly. We see evidence for really elaborate and dignified burials. Sites like Grimaldi in Italy or Chancellote in France show skeletons carefully arranged, often covered in red ochre powder, suggesting ritual, symbolism, maybe ideas about blood or life force.
And grave goods.
Yes. Often buried with tools, sometimes those incredibly finely crafted Solutrean points we talked about, and personal ornaments like necklaces of shells or animal teeth, elaborate beaded garments. Some of these grave goods would have taken immense skill and time to create, weeks perhaps. This points towards not just respect for the dead, but maybe specialized craftspeople and emerging social hierarchies.
And the art itself. The cave paintings, the carvings.
The art is just stunning. It speaks volumes about their cognitive abilities, their capacity for abstract thought, and likely having enough leisure time beyond pure survival. We see those three main types. The incredible cave paintings, think Lascaux, Chauvet, Altamira, depicting animals with amazing realism and dynamism.
Uh-huh.
Then petroglyphs carvings made directly onto rock surfaces. And that portable art we mentioned, carvings on bone, antler, ivory, stone. The level of detail, even on tiny objects, is astonishing. It shows a sophisticated mind at work, observing the world and representing it symbolically.
There was also that fascinating detail about human molar teeth being used as pendants. What's the story there?
Right. That's where ethnoarchaeology comes in, studying modern or recent traditional societies to understand past behaviors. Comparisons with Australian Aboriginal practices suggest these molar pendants might have been part of a challenging rite of passage.
Rite of passage. How?
The idea is that adolescent boys, maybe entering a warrior group or manhood, might have had a molar tooth ritually removed, a painful test of endurance. Wearing that tooth as a pendant would then be a powerful symbol of their resilience, their group affiliation, their new identity.
Wow.
So what does that suggest? It points towards complex social structures, initiation rituals, symbolic communication, and the construction of personal and group identity way back in the Upper Paleolithic. They weren't just surviving, they were building intricate cultures full of meaning.
Absolutely fascinating. Okay, let's bring this deep dive closer to home now, connecting all this ancient history to our biology today, specifically menstruation and menopause. How are these fundamental biological processes shaped not just by our bodies, but by culture and evolution?
It's a crucial connection. Anthropologists like Buckley and Gottlieb observed that beliefs and taboos surrounding menstruation are almost universal across cultures. It's very often seen as something powerful, sacred, or even potentially dangerous, leading to practices like temporary isolation for women.
Can you give an example?
Sure. In the Kailash Valley in northwest Pakistan, an anthropologist named Wine Maggie studied these communal menstrual houses called bashali. Women go there during their periods, men aren't allowed inside. It's a separate space.
And the interpretation of this isolation has changed over time.
It seems so. Early cultural evolutionists, like Tyler, propose that maybe women themselves initially established this separation, perhaps seeing their bodies and cycles as sacred and needing protection or privacy. But later, particularly in more patriarchal societies, this same practice might have been reinterpreted or imposed by men to portray women as polluted or subordinate during menstruation.
Interesting shift. Is there an anthropological take from our hunter-gatherer past?
Yes, some anthropologists suggest that from a purely practical survival standpoint, in mobile hunter-gatherer groups, temporary seclusion during menstruation might have been adaptive. The scent of blood could potentially attract predators, endangering not just the woman but the entire group. So restricting movement or staying in a designated area during bleeding could have been a simple safety measure.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this connects to an even broader concept, the metaformic theory. What's that about?
This is a really thought-provoking idea from Judy Graham's book, Blood, Bread, and Roses. She argues that many aspects of modern religion and culture might have their deepest roots in ancient female menstruation rituals, what she calls metaforms.
How so?
She suggests that early women recognized the synchronicity between their own cycles and lunar cycles, perhaps fostering a sense of connection to cosmic rhythms. This awareness, combined with the practical need for seclusion, could have led to the development of timed, patterned behaviors, periodic retreats, specific actions which, over millennia, evolved into formalized rituals and eventually perhaps laid the groundwork for religious practices.
Wow, that's a big claim.
It is, and she points out that the very word ritual might derive from ritua, a term related to menstruation in parts of South India. It completely reframes the potential origins of some core human cultural behaviors, placing female biology at the center.
But culturally, it's not always negative or about seclusion, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. Many cultures celebrate menarche, a girl's first period, as a positive transition to womanhood, recognizing her potential fertility. In South India, there's a celebration called Ritu Sanagu, where relatives bring gifts.
Right.
And historically, some cultures saw menstrual blood as powerful. The Roman writer Pliny suggested it could ward off pests or even help win battles, sometimes used in folk magic. But yes, alongside these positive views, you definitely see the restrictive taboos in many places, like bans on temple entry or handling food, a real cultural mix.
Okay, shifting to the biology from an evolutionary perspective,
Yeah.
why do human females menstruate? Most mammals don't have monthly bleeding like this. It seems quite costly in terms of nutrients lost.
You're right, it is energetically costly, but evolution doesn't usually maintain costly processes unless there's a benefit. There are two main adaptive explanations put forward. First, it might be a defense mechanism against sperm-borne pathogens.
Pathogens.
Yes, intercourse can introduce bacteria or other microbes into the female reproductive tract. Menstrual blood is rich in immune cells and antibodies, so the monthly shedding and flushing of the uterine lining could help cleanse the uterus and fallopian tubes, reducing infection risk.
Okay, a cleaning mechanism. What's the second reason?
The second idea is that it's an energy efficiency device. Building up and maintaining the endometrium, the uterine lining needed for pregnancy, requires a lot of energy. Instead of keeping this thick, rich lining constantly maintained throughout the cycle, it might be more energy efficient for the body to build it up, wait about a week or so after ovulation to see if an egg implants, and if not, just shed it and start over.
Rather than maintaining it indefinitely when pregnancy hasn't occurred.
Exactly. Discarding and rebuilding might actually cost less energy overall than continuous maintenance. So natural selection might have favored this more economical cyclical process.
Fascinating. Okay, let's move to the other end of the reproductive cycle. Menopause, typically hitting between 49 and 52. This also has layers of biology, culture, and evolution, right? What's the basic biological signal?
Biologically, it signals the end of a woman's reproductive capacity. Her ovaries stop releasing eggs, and hormone levels shift significantly. Essentially, her body is no longer physiologically geared for pregnancy and childbirth.
And this doesn't happen in men.
Not in the same definitive way. Men don't bear the direct physiological costs of pregnancy and lactation. While sperm count and quality do decline with age, typically after 40 or so, men can potentially remain fertile much longer. There isn't that sharp cutoff point.
What kind of factors influence when a woman experiences menopause? Is it purely genetic?
No, it's influenced by many things. Genetics plays a role, but so do nutrition, lifestyle, overall health, socioeconomic status, and even stress levels.
Oh, so?
Well, data like the National Family Health Survey in India show clear correlations. Women with higher standards of living, better nutrition, generally experience menopause later. Professional women seem to experience premature menopause less often than manual laborers, for instance.
Suggesting stress or physical strain plays a part.
It seems likely. Also, medical interventions like hysterectomy uterus removal significantly increase the chances of earlier menopause. We see this dramatically in places like Andhra Pradesh, where a high rate of hysterectomies corresponds to many women experiencing menopause in their 30s or 40s. Essentially, if the body is under significant physical or nutritional stress, its reproductive systems may shut down earlier.
Now, how is menopause viewed across different cultures? Is it universally seen as, an ending?
This raises such an important question because the cultural lens varies enormously. In cultures that heavily idealize youth and feminine beauty, you could argue many Western capitalist societies fall into this menopause, can be framed quite negatively.
Like a loss.
Yes, a loss of youth. A loss of sexual vitality, the end of being perceived as a young woman. Popular culture, like shows exploring aging, often touches on this sense of ending or diminishment.
But that's not the only perspective.
Not at all. In many other societies, particularly those where women's lives might have been more restricted during their reproductive years, menopause can actually be a time of liberation, increased status, and newfound freedoms. It's often welcomed, even celebrated.
Really? Can you give examples?
Sure. Anthropological studies show Mayan women, for instance, often look forward to menopause because it grants them higher social status. And Marcia Flint's study in Rajasthan and Haryana in India found something similar.
What did she find?
She found that women who previously had to observe strict veiling practices, purdah, and were often secluded, especially during menstruation, experienced a dramatic shift after menopause. They could interact more freely with men, join in conversations, even share hookah or liquor, and sometimes take on significant community leadership roles, like heading the local council, panchayat. It was a genuine gain in freedom and respect.
A completely different framing from restriction to liberation. Okay, finally, let's look at menopause through an evolutionary lens. Why does it even exist? Is it adaptive or just something that happens because we live longer now?
That's the big evolutionary question, and there are two main competing hypotheses. First is the non-adaptive hypothesis.
Meaning it serves no real purpose?
Essentially, yes. This view argues that menopause isn't something natural selection specifically favored. It's seen more as a recent artifact of our dramatically increased human lifespan.
How so?
The idea is our bodies were perhaps evolutionarily programmed to reproduce effectively only up to the typical lifespan of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, maybe 40, 45 years old. Now that modern medicine, nutrition, and hygiene allow us to live much longer, our reproductive organs, like other body parts, simply start to wear out or decline beyond their intended functional lifespan. Menopause is just the system running down.
What's the weakness of that idea?
The main challenge is explaining why males don't experience a similar, sharp, definitive cessation of reproductive function if it's just about lifespan exceeding evolutionary design.
Right. So what's the alternative, the adaptive hypothesis?
This theory proposes that menopause did evolve because it provides a distinct advantage, ultimately increasing the overall reproductive success or survival of the human lineage. There are a few key ideas under this umbrella.
Okay, like what?
One is the egg mutation problem. Remember, unlike men who continuously produce new sperm, women are born with all the eggs they'll ever have.
Right.
Over decades, these stored eggs are exposed to environmental factors and have a cumulative chance of acquiring genetic mutations. Pregnancies later in life, therefore, carry a slightly higher risk of genetic disorders in the offspring. Menopause, by putting a limit on the reproductive lifespan, could be an adaptation to reduce the transmission of these accumulated mutations, thus improving the health and fitness of the next generation. A kind of quality control.
Makes sense. What else?
Then there's the mother's hypothesis. This suggests that as a woman gets older, the risks and energy costs associated with pregnancy and childbirth increase significantly both for her and the potential child. It might be more evolutionarily advantageous for her to stop trying for new children and instead invest her remaining energy and resources into ensuring the survival and success of the children she already has who are still dependent on her.
Focusing on existing offspring.
Exactly. And then there's the very influential grandmother's hypothesis, which is kind of an extension of that.
How does that work?
This proposes that postmenopausal women gain an evolutionary advantage not just by caring for their own children, but crucially by helping their daughters reproduce successfully and by actively caring for their grandchildren.
Providing childcare and resources.
Precisely. In hunter-gatherer societies, older women, freed from the demands of their own infant care, could contribute significantly by gathering food, providing childcare, and passing on knowledge. This support would increase the survival rates of their grandchildren, thereby ensuring the propagation of their own genes indirectly. Menopause frees them up for this vital supportive role. It explains why selection might favor a long post-reproductive lifespan, specifically in females.
That's a really compelling explanation for why older women play such crucial roles in families and communities. Okay, wow, what an incredible journey we've taken today. Let's try and quickly pull together some of the main threads just to recap.
It's been quite the sweep, hasn't it? So, thinking back to India's Paleolithic past, remember H.G. Sankalia's key work firmly establishing that Middle Paleolithic period. We saw how widespread those cultures were, adapting to diverse climates from north to south, and how their tools, sometimes made from beautiful stones like jasper and agate, hinted at more than just survival, maybe early aesthetics or symbolism.
Right. And then the Rhodesian man's Enigma, that transitional fossil really highlighted the whole lumpers versus splitters debate in evolution, didn't it?
Yeah.
And how finds around the world, including China, complicate the simple narratives and even get tied up with ideas of national identity. It's a reminder that the fossil record is complex.
Absolutely. And then the Sapiens story itself, we contrasted that regional continuity idea with out of Africa and the huge shift brought by genetics, especially Svante Pääbo's Nobel-winning work sequencing the Neanderthal genome. That discovery of 1–4% Neanderthal DNA in modern non-Africans supporting the partial replacement or interbreeding model just fundamentally changed our understanding of our own ancestry.
Right.
We're all carrying a little bit of that ancient history.
Such a game changer. Then we marveled at the Upper Paleolithic flourishing. Homo sapiens hitting a cultural peak, right? Advanced tools like the atlatl, those mysterious Venus figurines, the explosion of art cave paintings, intricate carvings, complex burials, suggesting ritual and social structure, real signs of higher intelligence and maybe even leisure time.
And that mind-bending idea from Harari, maybe plants domesticated us by encouraging a sedentary lifestyle. A lot to chew on there.
Definitely. And finally, we connected it all back to life's biological rhythms, menarche and menopause. We saw how these deeply biological events are completely interwoven with cultural interpretations viewed as sacred, taboo, polluting, or even liberating, depending on the society.
And the evolutionary angles, too. Menstruation possibly protecting against pathogens or saving energy, and menopause potentially reducing harmful mutations, or, through the grandmother hypothesis, providing a crucial adaptive advantage by allowing older women to invest in their grandchildren's survival. Biology and culture, deeply intertwined.
So, reflecting on all this,
Okay.
it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Considering how profoundly our bodies, our behaviors, our cultures have been shaped by everything from ice age climates to the invention of farming, how much of our modern lives, our health, our social structures are still subtly guided by these incredibly ancient biological and cultural legacies, maybe in ways we don't even consciously realize?
That's the big question to ponder, isn't it? And perhaps understanding this deep history, this long evolutionary journey of our biology and culture, could actually help us better navigate the challenges we face today, whether they're related to health, society, or our relationship with the planet. Our past might hold more keys to the present and future than we think.
A profound thought to end on. Thank you.